Hey, welcome to the Ignite Movements podcast. We are so thankful that you chose to join us today. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I want to encourage you to do that so you get all the latest content. New episodes come out on the first Wednesday of every month. And we are serious about helping people move beyond a one ministry mindset to move on to multiplying disciples and multiplying ministries, multiplying churches. And so today I've got with me Chris Miller. Chris Miller is our West Market campus pastor. He's been with us since 2012. He's done an amazing job of leading. But today I've asked him to join me because he had a one particular really amazing leadership breakthrough that really changed everything for you. So Chris, take a moment and just kind of tell us about that journey.
Well, 2012, got a phone call from John Oakley, our worship pastor at the Springbrook campus, to come back to Johnson City, Tennessee to plant a church, something we'd never done before. So we were excited. We came in. We had about 80 people that met with us, and we were meeting as a small group, but then we had to begin having church services on Sunday that quickly grew from 1 to 2 services, while we were also renovating this space that we're sitting in today, which is the old Mountain View / Leisure Lane bowling alley, plus deal with all the other ministry aspects as well. And I just remember that was a year that I basically don't remember anything that happened. Like, it was just so busy. It was filled with good chaos. And I remembered I kept trying to meet with everybody. Like, it was just me, a part-time staff member, another part-time staff member, and we were running close to 250 people, and it just seemed like there was no family time. I was physically exhausted. I was mentally exhausted, really, because I was trying to do everything on my own, and everything had to go through me. And so I realized, the idea that either this is going to make it or not, based on me.
You're not going to make it.
Exactly. My wife, I know, is like, are you sure, you're doing the right thing? And so really a lot of it boiled down to me trying to do everything, which is not a good ministry principle. It's not a good life principle. One person cannot do everything. And honestly, we were spending a lot of time with people that we weren't sure if they were disciplable, if they even had influence, if they even cared. But we were at that new stage, so we were trying to have everybody over. And I realized one day, sitting in our living room having lunch with a couple, which one of them never came back, our time has got to be with people who are going to be about the mission, who are going to be people of influence, who are going to be people that we can pour our life into, similar to what Jesus did, because we talk about that a lot in the church world, but we don't necessarily apply it or live it out.
Yeah, that's true. So you kind of you hit a wall, but then you kind of had a breakthrough, which was huge, and it just really radically changed how you go about what you do. So talk a little bit about that.
I went to a Pipeline conference. It's a Christian conference put on by Lifeway, and actually got to hear Mac Lake, Carey Nieuwhof. But I saw this principle, and even with Dan Grider, one of our mentors, who had said before, more time with less people equals greater results. And then I visibly saw it happening when Mac was throwing out his pipeline diagram, which he said, this group of people gets the majority of your time, then this group of people will hopefully have the same influence and time that you gave the other person ahead of them. And so when I got back, I just met with all of our directors, and I had to renegotiate because for them, a lot of their job description or a lot of their volunteer capacity was make sure these people show up, and that's really the only responsibility you have. Make sure every volunteer shows up, every room has what it needs, and that people come on time. And I just renegotiated, and I said, look, this is going to be more about you investing your time outside of Sunday morning just to check in on them, to actually check to see where they're at in the competency of what you're asking them to do, checking on their character. How are they doing with Jesus? How are they doing with spiritual growth?
So what I hear Chris saying is that there was this point where he sat down with his directors and he said, I'm going to develop you, and I'm going to move you from being just a manager, just the volunteers show up on time, and the things that are supposed to be laid out for you will be there and they'll be available, to actually leading people. So from manager to leader, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and the hope was that I could actually care about them through the time that I spent with them. Like generally asking, how has this week been for you? What are you struggling with? What do you need this week? Outside of anything church world, like what do you need this week that I could help encourage you or provide something that you may possibly need?
Because if they're not in a good place, they don't have the bandwidth to lead.
Yeah. And I mean, even with a, how are you doing? And if they're not okay, then you take the time to stop and listen and possibly pray and check on them after the service. Like, hey, we didn't really have a chance to talk through what you had mentioned to me. Let's talk more about that. So there's a care.
You can't do that with very many people. So it's got to just be those few people who are your team that from there everything else flows.
Oh, yeah. And I think if you model that and you live that out, that's going to be a part of your culture as well. So care is a big deal. Content, the things that we're asking them to do, the way that we're asking them to do it, which flows more into our rooms, our Rich Kids rooms, clubhouses, tech booth, like a lot of those competency aspects that you want the person to be getting better at what they're doing. And so you talk through that, what went well, what didn't go well, what would you have done differently, is how we're doing things being effective with who's here. And then I think you also want to celebrate with them, and you also want to check in with like their character, like, what is God doing in your life? What do you feel like God's saying to you? I know Ralph Moore has his 3 questions that he used to plant churches, and it basically was, what did God say to you? What are you going to do about what he said? And then how can I help you? So I've tried to integrate that in as well with a lot of the conversations with directors who became shepherds. Because my thought was, if they're only directing people, there's not going to be a personal connection to that. So I renegotiated with them, like I said, and none of them were like, no. They actually felt better about it, and I think bought into the vision more. And I mean, it just revolutionized our campus.
It feels like that you're asking, you're like, I'm the paid person, so I need to bear all this. I don't know that I can ask that level of a lay person. But the thing about it is it kind of really infuses it with a lot more purpose, because, at first we're like, hey, can you just pull off these menial tasks that anybody can do, just sending out schedules and things like that. And if you can just make sure everybody shows up, and after a while that just kind of feels like, it's important, but it just doesn't really feel like, am I making a huge difference? And then 2, one of the key things that I think Chris just touched on is as you're asking those personal questions about spiritual growth and where are you personally, that is just so important, because this leadership pipeline that we're going to be referring to from Mac Lake here in just a second, and Chris has already alluded to, it becomes also an opportunity for being a disciple-making pipeline as well. And so that's just a huge opportunity that you have in that situation as you're investing in those few people. So I think this is such an important concept, because if you are a gifted leader at all and a self-motivated leader at all, you're going to grow yourself into a mess. That you absolutely positively are going to grow yourself into a mess. No matter how stripped down you try to make things, what Chris described was just starting a church, having a children's ministry, having greeters, having a service, and just a Sunday morning service. That's it. And then maybe, adding small groups to that. And so that's a very stripped down church. That's not offering a whole smorgasbord of things for people to choose from. That is a very stripped down church. And yet it becomes overwhelming if you are the one person who has said, okay, we need greeters. So I'm going to go out and recruit the greeters, and I'm going to train them. And you think, well, I'm the only person right now. It's a one-man show, so I need to do that. Or you go out and say, well, we need to start groups, so I'm going to go recruit the group leaders. And then, from there, I'm going to manage that situation. And what happens is it's not very long before you're dealing with the group leader who wants to quit after 6 months, and you're trying to replace them, the greeter who never blocks out their dates and then just doesn't show up. And so that station is left completely empty. And just right on down the line, children's ministry issues. And all of a sudden, you've created this monster that you have to manage. And so this concept is going to save your life. Is that fair?
I think so.
It's going to save your life.
Yeah, so at that point, you're going to say to yourself, well, I need help, but like I have all these other things going on. And now you're saying to me, like, now I've got to find and train and equip and, deploy these other leaders. Like, how does that even happen?
Yeah, so now you're trying to find high level leaders to oversee all the stuff you've been overseeing, while at the same time you don't want that to fall apart while you're trying to train the leaders. And so that is a very, very hard balance at that point. So I know for us, we started the first church with just your basic ministries, and we got everything up and running, and we got all the plates spinning, and we had great greeters, we had great children's ministry volunteers, and small groups were killing it, and everything was just going really, really, really well. And about 2 years in, I just kind of remember that it felt like that things that everybody was excited about and everybody was on board with were starting, like plates were starting to drop here and there. And I remember we had a young man that was visiting the church who was studying for ministry, and he came into my office. He had been coming for about 3 weeks, and he said, just to be honest with you, I like your vision and I like where you're going, but I don't think things are going very well around here. And I remember thinking, he's studying for ministry. He's young, like he's super young. And I just remember thinking, kid, like you have no idea what it takes to get something like this off the ground and then keep all the plates spinning. But I think he really had kind of touched on something that I probably hadn't paid enough attention to, and that is that I was doing it all on my own. I was carrying this thing at the moment, instead of really training up a few people that I poured my life into, and that they poured their lives into other leaders that they were developing. And so, that was something that was a real wake-up call for me. I was coaching a church planner the other day, and I was talking to him, and he said, what happened was he launched his church right when COVID hit. Like literally 2 weeks before everybody was shutting everything down, he had just launched his church. And of course, they just kind of shut everything down. A lot of things that he thought he had in place are no longer in place. And so he's kind of relaunching the church in a sense. And so we were talking the other day, and he said, we're adding back children's ministry, and there were some other ministries that he was like, yeah, we're going to start putting those in place. And we talked about this concept that before you add, say, small groups, at this point, I think what we would say is train a small, pour into and lead a small group director first, and then put them in place to lead those small groups as they get started, instead of just going out and recruiting a bunch of small group leaders. Now you're in charge of them, and then at some point you try to get yourself some help. And so that was something that I think we would do differently if we had the choice. And so, Chris, why is this so hard? Like most of the time, we set things up exactly the way you and I did it the first time around. Why don't we just do this in the first place?
I think anytime you develop another human being, it takes so much more time. It's easier just to hand things off versus actually talking through what the expectations are, recasting vision, follow up because you want to see how it went for the person. And people can be messy. I mean, my friend Bob Goff always says, love messy people. You're one of them. So you're walking through their personal life with them, as well as entrusting them with leadership opportunities and capabilities. And really, we want them to raise their lid, where we find them to another expectation. And even Jesus took 3 years. I think mainly with Peter, James, and John that did the most as far as we can tell via the New Testament. It took 3 years. Yeah. And then you think about the church, the early church, and the progression that it made through a small group of people that were also developing people and sending them out. And so it takes time to say, you watch me, and then we'll talk, and then we'll do it together, then we'll talk, then you do it, and I watch, and we talk, and then you do that with somebody completely different. It does take a lot more time, but I would rather do that 100 times over than continually filling roles throughout the church of various people. Okay, so I love what you just said, because really what we're talking about is it's hard work, which I think a lot of times we try to take shortcuts because somehow we actually have this idea that if I go out and I grab 5 people that I think would be great community group leaders, and I have one meeting, that I've set up a ministry. And
It would be amazing if it worked that way, and somehow we really believe that, but it doesn't. It doesn't work. It takes a lot more personal investment and leading on a constant basis, and you don't have the time to do that with even 5 group leaders, in addition to everything else that you have going on. And so we're just trying to take shortcuts, and I think also we're trying to be in a hurry. So like I'm trying to get a launch team off the ground, and we're trying to get everything in place, and we want to open the doors and wow the public with what we have to offer. So doggone it, I think we should have some small groups to offer. And so I don't have time to do everything you just talked about to develop a leader, but I do have time to grab 5 warm bodies and hand them an orientation manual and put a sign up out that they're group leaders. I got time to do that, which is not effective, but I do have time to do that. And so let's talk a little bit about the nitty gritty of like, how does this work? And I really want to refer you. We're huge fans of the Mac Lake Leadership Pipeline stuff. I really want to encourage you. We're going to talk at the end about how you can access his stuff. But basically, he talks about several different levels of the leadership pipeline, and it starts, down just a person just leading themselves well. Then he talks about people who are leading followers. Then he talks about people who are leading leaders, and then you got people who are leading departments, and you got people who are leading like entire churches or organizations. And so that's really the process, and what that looks like, as Chris described, is as the leader of the organization, he more time with less people equals greater results. He spent time with just the people who were leading leaders or leading departments, I guess we would say in that case. And modeled for them how that they could do the same thing for the people under them who are leading leaders. And then all the way down the line that goes to where each level, people are only spending time with a few people, not a lot. It's broken down to a few people, and the leadership pipeline kind of looks like that. I think at some point, it kind of could finger out. You've got several people at this level who are just dealing with 5 people at a time, say. And so everybody's kind of pouring into just a few people at a high level, developing people at a high level, looking for new potential and bringing those people on at the new level. And so if you're say you're a small groups director and you have so many groups in your church that you have small group coaches. So a small group coach would regularly be looking for somebody they could develop to do what they do, to become a coach and move up. And so, but they're spending just spending all their time with a few people. And so that's really kind of the gist of how this thing works. And when it works, it really can be really kind of be amazing. And so I just want to encourage you for sure to check out Mac's Leadership Pipeline information. So you want to talk a little bit about just the whole pipeline, how it works?
Yeah, I mean, for us, staff, that's the people that I spend the most time with, I give the most investment to. They have 100% accountability with me and for me and to me, and there's no boundaries with my phone or our house. Like, they're always welcome. They can always call. They can always text. So I'm investing the majority of my time back into the staff. And then it's directors, because we each have directors, whether that's children's ministry or tech ministry or First Impressions or cafe host team. Those directors, we're pouring into them, so they will also do the same to the leaders who are also a big part of that environment, because they are the face of the environment. They're the ones who set the tone for the environment and the experience. And then you have people that, are partners or volunteers that are not as indebted to, what we do on Sundays, but the more time they're connecting with that leader who's connected with the director, who's connected with staff, the hope is that they're being cared for. They're talking through content and creativity. They're making a connection. So all the things that we value and that we want to be important and a big part of their, walk with Christ, number one, but just through who they are and how they lead, hopefully it's going through the pipeline that everybody's having that experience. And instead of me trying to meet with 30 to 40 people, let's just say in a month, I'm really connecting with 5 or 6. And so it's way better.
Yeah. So you've got a structure in place that is developing leaders, which I mean, volunteers, good leadership, those kind of things. There's a huge deficit in most churches. You've got a accountability structure in place that is also caring for people, so that people are regularly in touch with somebody who is caring for them and shepherding them. And then you also have, that disciple making piece as well, as we talked about earlier, that is all coming out of this one simple relational structure that it's not a program necessarily. It's not like some sort of highly structured, lots of meetings. It's just, I want you to do life with and lead with these 5 people, and I want them to do the same thing with the people that they're leading. Okay, so as we kind of get near the end here, let's talk about some of the advantages of doing this. I think some of them are obvious that we've kind of already touched on, and so we may reiterate some of those. But the first one, I think, is kingdom perspective. I think when you are developing a whole pipeline of leadership, I think what that does is it puts you in a position where you can multiply. And so, one of the things that you'll think right away is, well, maybe you're just a really well-staffed, your volunteers are filling out all the positions, and you think, well, what would I be like if every single person in this pipeline was working to develop another leader? What in the world would I do with all those leaders? Well, that's where you begin to have an opportunity to multiply, to start other churches, to send out other people. Not to mention the fact that you're going to have people who go away to college. You're going to have people who their job gets transferred, and so you are always going to have the leaders that you need as a result of that.
I think another one is holistically, it keeps you healthy. If you're trying to do everything, it means you have zero time to work out or to grocery shop proper, or family time. And if the house is not right, then ministry definitely can't be done as well, because that's where you're called to lead first. But I know I probably feel physically the worst in those years where I tried to do it all. And of course there's the stress, and your body tells you through various things like your heart hurting or ulcer, various things that you've not spent time to take care of your body. You're not getting enough sleep or rest, and if those things are out of whack, then you're not going to be as spiritually in tune, I think, to what God is wanting to do through you. Plus, you're not going to be as receptive to human beings and people that you're serving because you don't feel as good.
Yeah, that's true. I think it also creates an expectation of leadership development. I think one of the things that a lot of times we believe is that if I put this person in place, they're going to want to develop other people. Or I know at times we've looked at our volunteers in various ministries and said, you have the authority to go and grab somebody else and begin to get them involved and teach them what you do. That's a nice statement, but nobody does that. But when you actually have these few relationships that you're having constant conversations with, and you're being asked questions like, who do you see on the horizon that you could develop? All of a sudden, now there is an expectation all the way through the organization to develop new leaders.
That's good. And I think, ultimately at the end, it's the best use of the time that you have. We each have a certain amount of time that we have every single day and within a work week. And when I'm investing the majority of my time into developing leaders, then that's going to give me the most return, And I think Jesus, if you look at his ministry, 80% of his time was with the disciples. And I would say even more time with Peter, James, and John. And then 20% was really just with the crowds who mostly didn't choose to follow him. So I'm going to put my time into the people that I know are bought into the mission and the vision and want to see people transition into a relationship with Jesus.
Yeah, that's so important. This principle of spending more time with less people is so important because it's going to become the lid for your leadership. It's going to become the lid in your one organization. It's certainly going to keep you from multiplying movements and igniting new movements if we don't get a hold of this concept. one of the things we're dedicated to at Ignite Movements is to help you get your hands on resources that will practically help you do these things. And so, again, we really recommend Mac Lake stuff. And so you can go to multiplygroup.org and see all the things that Mac has available there. You can also follow him on his YouTube channel, which is fantastic. And Chris, I know you're a big fan of Mac's. Talk a little bit about what he has to offer that really helps put this in practice.
Yeah, I would say really any of his books. And when you begin to get into this concept of pipeline, he does a great job of giving you the overview, but also introducing concepts like competency and character, and elements that you'll use through your discussion points with the people that are in your pipeline. And Mac's awesome because he continues to produce more resources, but he's also giving you simplified versions, and he's producing content on leading others, leading yourself, leading leaders, and really the multiplication effect, a book that has just come out by Mac. It's kind of an overview of all those things, but he meets you at the ground level and helps you to get it in a simple way, but also to make it applicable. Like there's always an application point. There's always, that's what I love about Mac's stuff, is there's always questions. He is a question master. So you don't just take the information and the knowledge and sit with it, but you actually are challenged to live it out and apply it.
Yeah. When I first got introduced to this concept, and it was kind of broken down that at each of these stages, you need to have a certain training that you have in place and a mindset of how you're going to move people up through this leadership pipeline, and you need to have character milestones and competency milestones at each one of these levels. I was a little overwhelmed, and then all of a sudden, like, I started seeing these books pop up of leading others, leading leaders, and I was like, this does exactly that. Like, it already has it laid out for you. So it's awesome, the resources that he has available. So thank you so much for joining us today, Chris. Thank you for sharing your story and the amazing job that you've done in transitioning to this mindset and the difference that it's made in the organization. And again, subscribe. If you're not a subscriber, let somebody else know if this was helpful to you. Thank you so much for being with us, and we'll see you next month.